Hey everybody, welcome to the Huffman Basketball Podcast. Today we have Brandon Darton, the Harbor Springs legend, Michigan State basketball player, walked on, right?
Yep. As a
After
junior,
after
2 years.
2 years. Of course, after all the years of tutelage from Trevor and Damon Huffman, just us yelling at you to get lower on your crossovers. And no, like we can't take any responsibility for Brandon Darton's ascension to Michigan State. But we'd like to thank our business sponsors today, the shifttc.com. Shift Healthcare Center specializes in peripheral neuropathy, headache, neck pain, back pain reversal. Shift uses cutting edge technology and the most up to date research, which has led Shift to being voted simply the best chiropractor in Traverse City for 4 years running. Go to the shifttc.com to schedule a complimentary consultation today. I think I'm actually going to go when I get back. I'm going to reach out to the Shift because my back is in dire straits as I get
Is
older.
that from the tractor incident?
I fell off a tractor. That's correct. I don't like to talk about it. It was a traumatic experience in my life. Thank you, Dad. But I'm. It's just like anything in life. You get your ups and downs. I mean, I've broken my ankle 4 times in high school. I don't think if I had not broken those ankles, I would have ever learned like how to really bounce back quickly from adversity. Like the first one I was depressed, the second one I was sad, the third one I was like, all right, well, I just got to get back in the weight room and start doing my thing to get back. By the fourth one, it was just like, it's just unlucky. It's just part of sports. But my mental concept of like injury changed so much. So shift, I'm gonna be coming to you for my back because the back is a different beast.
Yeah, knock on wood. I haven't had to deal with that.
Well, you're young. You're young. Well, how old are you now?
38.
38. 38 years young. That's amazing. Let's talk about. I don't even remember how we met. Like, I mean, I know you had a. I'm what 6 years older than you. So maybe when we were at Petoskey, Johnny Flynn and I, you maybe had come to a few camps. Is that when we first started?
Yeah, I think we probably met first. We probably met when you guys were working camps, even just for Coach Starkey, like just working the high school camps before you'd started your own stuff.
Yeah.
When I would come over there to play as probably sixth or seventh grade, probably.
You were just a little guy,
Yeah.
a little guy. Yeah, I mean it's funny because like those summer camps were like what we. That's all Northern Michigan had. Literally, we had one summer camp and we had team camps. Once you got into high
Yeah,
school, like
yeah.
you did Gaylord team camp and you did, maybe you got to bounce around to a few of like the high school summer camps where there's like 1,000 kids and two coaches.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that I mean I know you're doing a lot of work with young kids now, but even then, right? You were when you and John were in high school. I think that's one of the things that I'm being Thanksgiving most thankful for is that you both gave me a lot of attention and I have really had the feeling that you really cared about my development even when you guys were in high school, which I think is unique in that sense. I think so many guys are worried about being cool or their own sort of high school image, and you guys both, I again just have a lot of thankfulness for the time and effort that you both put in with me in those early years, especially.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I think I would like to take credit for that, but I won't because I feel like Coach Starkey and Matt Tam, a lot of those Petoskey kind of mentors that I had, every Saturday since I was a freshman on varsity, we would go to the rec program and work with the youth kids. And I always loved it. It was always something that I looked forward to doing, kind of you say giving back, but it was really just kind of like once you try to teach basketball, it's completely different than what you know about basketball or how you play basketball. So teaching, at a young age really taught me like, oh, I actually don't know anything about basketball. Like when you try to break down movements and triple threats and shooting form and it's a lot harder than you think. But I am grateful that those coaches, really kind of had that type of culture in their program, and like that's the best culture you can have where you're like you're saying those star players on varsity come back and they check their ego at the door and they're just
Yeah.
helping the next generation of stars in that area. So that was like my first lesson in terms of like giving back what you know. It's kind of an infinite game. You can always give back and serve other players, and my career is going to end, your career is going to end, but you can always kind of play that infinite game of teaching and educating and mentoring, and that's why even now I started a mentoring program, for some of the kids in northern Michigan, just because I feel like it's a missing thing. I helped RJ Taylor or Tyler Odie, these kids, Lexi Boyka, who they all went to D1. But then I'm thinking, what about the Brandon Dartons who just, are like, man, am I going to make varsity, or like you didn't know how good you could be, until somebody really just said, dude, you got a lot of potential, and you got to have a really good process to fulfill it.
Yeah, and I think to your point, for high schoolers who are kind of at that level to start giving back, it helps you learn the game a bit more by teaching it for sure. And then, speaking from experience, it really can have a profound impact on, on a young kid or even as you get older. So I think it's certainly important, to give back and not just be so self-consumed by your own process, but
Yeah.
by helping the next
Did you
generation.
guys do that at Harbor? I mean, why didn't you transfer to Petoskey, first of all? Like, that's nobody was who was coming over there. Joe Flynn? Was Joe Flynn
Yeah,
coming in to
Joe,
help you?
Joe, shooting for dollars at lunchtime with Joe. Was Joe
He could shoot. I mean,
again? Another
I don't even
another
know how he
player I
got the
got it.
ball to the rim. If for anybody that doesn't know Joe Flynn, he's like a Northern Michigan legend with Charlie Page. Like those guys won state championships together. And then when I was growing up, Joe would just take me out into the driveway and just decimate me in shooting games. We play
Yeah,
seven. Do you guys play seven
yeah, oh yeah,
together?
he could really sling
He'd
it.
just be like, 13 on, 14 on. I'm like, dude, when is this guy gonna miss? We're at like 15 in a row.
That little low
Yeah,
like Sean Marion type
yeah.
release almost.
It was like
Yeah.
he was like throwing a dart from his like chin. He'd like look at it. He'd do this thing where he'd like look at it and then pop. Anyway, I
Yeah,
digress.
good times, good times.
So what do you like for a parent out there who's like, I got a kid who's, eighth, ninth, 10th grade. What do you tell those parents? Their kids are getting more into basketball. They're getting more passionate about it. They want to strive for greatness. They just might not know what that process is. What do you tell? Like, when did it click for you?
Well, I'd like to turn the question back around to you a little bit because
Yeah.
I'm seeing a big difference, I think, from our time growing up versus now. Whereas I'm at the getting to that age now where a lot of my friends have kids who have started to play and are in
Mm-hmm.
that, say fourth, fifth, sixth grade level. And for me coming up, it was all really about skill work, really almost until high school. Whereas now I see a lot of these kids are just getting put in AAU programs, younger and younger and younger, and it's
Mm-hmm.
all about court time, and so many times they're traveling, like it's turned into this big business, right, where you're traveling, sometimes even flying to games for like fourth through
Yeah.
sixth grade. And I guess my take on that is that I don't I don't think that that's as beneficial as just dialing in your skill set, playing against the kids that are in your own community and close to home. But I'm curious to kind of see what your take on it is. I would put off the AAU scenario until much later,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I'm right on that or not.
Well, I think no, I think that the fourth graders flying around the country makes no sense to
Yeah,
me. Like,
yeah,
let's be honest. If you have a great coach or somebody that's in your corner helping you develop, and you have the ability to compete against players that are taller, faster, athletic than you, you don't need to fly anywhere because they're in your community if you're in fourth grade. I can go find 10 eighth graders, seventh graders, sixth graders right now to go kick your fourth graders' butt.
yeah, yeah,
But the problem is, how do you
yeah.
access that? How do you find that? Is there consistent, practice time or competitive time or open gym time for your kids' development? I think one of the problems is like that open gym scenario has died off, for especially in communities. Like we used to play in Harbor every, I think, Thursday and
Yeah, and
Sunday.
is that just because of with new like liability rules and everything? It's just tough for kids to get in the gym. It's tough for schools to
Yeah.
open the gym.
I think there's a lot more
Yeah,
fear around liability. And also, we used to have keys to the gym. We used to be able to
Yeah,
get, it was like
I made a copy of the keys when I was in eighth
laissez
grade.
faire back when we
Yeah,
were,
yeah, I
which
could.
helped, which
Yeah,
helped us develop, because we could get in
yeah,
whenever we wanted. We could also invite our friends and nobody really cared. The janitors would just kind of like look away
yeah,
and say like, "Oh
yeah,
shoot, there's Trevor again." But I
yeah,
do think that it's like if you're playing AAU but you're not actually getting coached, you're basically just paying to play against better competition.
yeah,
Which if if you need to find better competition, there's a lot of ways to find better competition. I think you can find the kids of 2 to 3 grades above you if you're that kid who needs that level of competition. But if it's for your ego and you're traveling around and you're flying to Vegas and doing these things, you know, it's probably a fun experience. But I also worry, like, do kids get burnt out? Are they allowed to play other sports and develop those other intangible athletic qualities that being a 3 sport athlete teaches you in your local community? And so I think it's a tough, it's a gray area. I mean, I think Bob Taylor and I talked about this with RJ Taylor. He's like, what I would do is just create little pods of competition around my community, or like local, find the kids around the area that all really love hoops, and let's get them in the gym, once to twice a week, play open gym, have some structure, do some, not just let them run around crazy like a AAU track meet, where it's just up and down, press, press, press. Kids don't really get to learn how to play half court basketball until they get to high school, I think. And I think when we played Harbor Gym, Harbor Open Gym, like that's all it was half court basketball. Unless Chuck got to open court cherry pick.
yeah,
But I do think that's an interesting debate because a lot of people, we just started an AAU program with HB. So, but I want it to be more like the European model where we have skill development once a week. We have a practice, once a week. We play we play in 6 to 7 tournaments, but they're, it's really about can we create a consistent flow of basketball development throughout a year
yeah,
rather than just like, oh, we're going to play AAU for 3 months. We're going to play 40
right, right,
games in
yeah,
2 months or something. Like,
yeah,
to me, that's just very short sighted, especially if you have a bad coach. Like if you have a
yeah,
bad coach, then you're just like, well, this is just open gym. I'm
yeah.
not
It's just
learning anything.
roll out
Yeah.
the balls and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's just roll out the ball up north, and
yeah,
get the kids to play like that. I do think there's a benefit in competition. I think the Northern Michigan kids especially benefit from going downstate and seeing that intensity on the ball and pressure and trapping and just like trash talking, kids from inner city. They're not going to back down. So I think it's really important those kids experience that, and I think that's what AAU is really good at, is kind of showing you like, okay, there's work to be done, but now what? That's what AAU really teaches you, is like, now what?
yeah. I think that's the now what for if I was giving advice to parents or kids coming up would be the biggest piece, right? In terms of um, not neglecting the skill work, or not neglecting the individual work, especially at a young age. Because like you can play the best competition all over the country, but if you don't have the skills, or you're not putting in the skill work, I think that ultimately catches up with you, or
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense in terms of the time invested versus what you're
right. And the money
getting out of it.
invested, like,
Yeah,
unless you just have unlimited funds, like, and you can hire a skill trainer and have him over to your house every day, and or get in a gym every day. That's kind of where it's gone downstate. Grand Rapids, Detroit, Flint. Everybody has that, like, oh, I got my skill trainer. We're gonna work on
yeah,
cones
yeah.
today. And okay, yeah, you're doing cone drills, but at the end of the day, I think having having just a few guys in your neighborhood, or your community that you can go play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, or 3-on-3 with is way more beneficial. You know,
Yeah, the other real interesting thing is I think that's different from growing up is you have, guys like yourself or some of these other trainers who are routinely putting out all sorts of online content. So
yeah,
you can get a personal trainer or an in-house sort of skill coach just by pulling
yeah,
up, subscribing to certain things, or pulling up different YouTubes, or watching different NBA trainers, and kind of putting your own program together if you're motivated to do so, which in all honesty, in most cases is probably better than just the local,
hmm
the local guy at LA
there's
Fitness,
so
or
much
whoever.
good content out
Yeah.
there. I mean, YouTube. There's I mean, we have our own app now, we're like, we have probably 40, 50 kids signed up on our skill training app. And, to me, it's just like, I think there's so much information now that kids don't really know what to listen to or to do. They don't know where to start. And so they might just be doing stuff that doesn't even apply to real game success,
Yeah.
So that's an issue too. But yeah, there are so many great trainers out there. But at the end of the day, are they teaching you to take more dribbles, or to be fancy or to like have flair but not actually any substance? That's where I get there's like that. You got to be able to balance it. If you can't knock down an open shot, if you can't shoot 8 or 9 out of 10 from three on stationary threes, like what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, well,
I
like
guess
you're
that,
not gonna be
yeah.
able to play at the next level if you can't shoot and you're not, fundamentally sound as a shooter. But yet, the first thing you see kids do is step back threes and all these crazy footwork patterns and dribble patterns and moves. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, can you knock down a three 8 out of 10 times? Can you make 10 free throws in a row?
And so
You know,
here's another question that I'll put back on you, especially for the younger group. I feel like in my own development, a huge benefit was I was shooting like one of those mini balls on
mm-hmm.
like an 8 foot rim when I was probably in like third to fifth grade. So I wasn't out there with a full size ball like trying to shoot a 3 pointer from my ankles.
Yeah,
I was actually like as a kid, you know, shooting a real jump shot with the
yeah,
mini ball on the mini hoop and like trying to emulate the different NBA or college guys that I saw. And I actually think, as weird as that may sound, like that, I think that form development, that like form shooting development early on, like actually translated pretty well to
yeah,
when I got stronger. Because I think you see a lot of kids who are starting out really young, trying to just bomb threes with a big ball, and the form never transitions, right? So
yeah. It's
they
tough.
still have that like sort of from the hip release even as they get older and they get to high school, which is hard to be successful without it
Yeah, you're
later on.
detraining habits. It's much harder to detrain a bad habit than it is just to
Yeah.
train a fundamentally good habit from an early age. And that's kind of the uh the crossroads I think for a kid and a parent is like, well, I want to play, but guess what? Everywhere American youth development starts, you have a full size ball, the rim's
Yeah.
at 10 feet. Really, you should be doing what you're doing, starting with a kid's
Okay. So
ball.
you agree with that as especially
I
at real young
100%
age,
agree with that.
like
Every
lower
we should
rim,
not
small
allow
ball.
like third,
Yeah.
fourth graders to even shoot threes with full
Yeah.
size balls.
Yeah.
Like we should move the 3 point line in that third, fourth, fifth grade. Like they should be learning how to shoot with the proper form. A 3 pointer shouldn't be 18 feet away. It should be, 10 to 12 feet away. But, like nobody's going to change the lines. Nobody wants to lower the rim.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to have different size balls, size
Yeah.
weight basketball. So I get it. Like it's just the lazy approach to youth development. In Europe, you go to Europe and every kid's got kids ball.
Okay,
They got the
that's
rims
interesting because
down.
I think there were points too where I was like, why are we playing? Fifth grade, why are we playing with the girls' ball? I would be like upset about it. Like, give us the
Mm-hmm.
real one. But as I look back, I think it probably would have been even more beneficial, especially as a real little kid, to be playing with that tiny ball on the smaller hoop and just really
Yeah.
trying to emulate like the form and the moves that you're going to be making as an
Yeah.
adult.
You basically want to replicate
Yeah.
the same, like as you get stronger, really an 18-foot shot is like a 12-foot shot for a fourth grader. Like
Yeah.
that. You want to find the balance, and there are some kids who are like naturally stronger and can sometimes maintain their form, but most kids, it's like who cares? Well, like let's just let's just downsize everything to what it would be like if you were actually strong enough to get the ball to the rim, so you don't have to develop these bad habits. But that's hard because our American system for youth development, even when I run a gym, like I can't lower the rims.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
would rather have kids in the gym like learn how to move and dribble and pass, and like hopefully they're doing their 100 shot form shots before every practice, so that as they get stronger, they're that muscle memory is there. But yeah, it's something I think about a lot because you see so many kids just watching ESPN and they watch the highlights, and then that's what they're going to do. They're going to come out and start jacking threes, they're going to do some wild step backs and think it's a good shot because Steph Curry can do it. And you're like, yeah, do you
I guess
know?
even as parental advice, kind of on that same note, uh, with development, and I saw a lot of this as when I transitioned into coaching and started
Mhm.
coaching like the middle school kids. So many coaches out there, or so many parents want to immediately jump into like, all right, we're going to run a very complicated offense, and we're going to have 46 plays, and we're going to have 5 different presses and the whole 9 yards. Whereas if the kids can't make layups or don't have the basic skill set, like you're spinning
Right.
your wheels. Like you can have the best plays drawn up, but if you can't make a shot from 1 foot away, you're not going to win very many games. So I
Right.
think it's
Exactly.
I think from a parental standpoint, it's important to not try and jump into like the overly complicated systems that basketball can have in place until you really have a mastery of just the very basics, right? Like if you don't understand all the reads out of a pick and roll, you shouldn't be running
Yeah.
20 different plays of different ways to get into a pick and roll. It's like focus on the
Right.
basics early on.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Most kids don't, they've never seen a pick and roll until they get to AAU and they don't even understand spacing. Like what do we run an offense for if the kids don't understand how to read these concepts? A down screen. If you can't read a down screen, why are we setting down screens? If like the
Yeah,
kids
yeah,
just doing it at like a robot. I mean that you can plug in any offense. To me, it's like let's introduce kids to concepts in small sided games where the
yeah,
defense is in different. They're going to switch. Are they going to hedge? Are they going to flat hedge? Are they going to drop? And so then these kids can start to read who's in the help side and what's the right play. And I think if you run sets, you're going to constantly be just like running the set regardless of what's happening. You're just like they could be going under everything, they could be switching everything. You're just still going to run it, and
yeah. It's
you're
very
not
robot. It becomes very robotic.
exactly. And then they miss layups anyway. You're like
Yeah,
sixth grade, like you're in sixth grade, like and most of these kids can't make a layup under duress or under contact. I think we were talking to Chuck Schuba, our sixth grade team. He said they probably in our last AU tournament they probably missed 10 to 20 just like fit with contact layups. Like
yeah,
he's like, I
yeah,
can't draw up any set to help you guys make layups. You guys are missing layups because it's under contact and these guys are aggressive. So we have to get better at like these situations, and go back to practice and start really working on okay, what are our footwork patterns, and then 1-on-0, like how can I pivot, how can I get an angle, and then we start to add 1-on-1, and then we're going to 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 where you're getting a ton of reps under duress. Like that's how I like to teach that age group because like they need reps of like
yeah, yeah.
live structured play with concepts, not plays.
I mean, that's probably in terms of the live structured play. I think if you're a young kid or you're a parent putting your kid through different workouts, I think that game speed or like you're pointing out, like okay, you can make layups in the gym all day long if you're just okay, go do 10 layups. But
Yeah,
how many times during an actual game do you really get an uninterrupted straight line path to the basket from a perfect 45-degree angle, put it in the box and move
yeah,
on? Like hardly ever, right? So I think
hardly
creating
ever.
those game like scenarios where it's a full speed effort and there's something a little bit like manufactured about it where you're not just again that 45-degree straight line
Yeah.
lay it in.
Like layup lines are worthless. Like why
Yeah,
whoever
they
invented
really
the
are.
layup
They
line?
really
Oh,
are. And
Kelsey's
now they've turned into like everybody trying to be
yeah.
do your
Meanwhile,
fancy.
we're all shooting like 25% on
Yeah.
contested layups. It's like, huh. Yeah, I think that's where I diverge from like traditional coaching. I really feel like it's a waste of time to do stuff. Like 1-on-0 is great. If you're working on a new technique, let's say you want to work on a new rondo pivot or up and under. Like, yeah, if you throw somebody in there and you're still learning the footwork, it's going to make it impossible for your brain to get that muscle memory down of how to move your body, how to get the timing of the ball, pivoting and then scoring. So I think 1-on-0 stuff is great. But as soon as you get it and you're moving slowly through that and you're getting the technique and the fundamentals, then as soon as your brain has it, then boom, okay, let's go into some post up 1-on-1, or let's go into some, off the back 1-on-1 from the 3 point line, or on the hip 1-on-1 from the 3 point line, or, you know, transition, 1-on-1 where they're just constantly under pressure the whole time. I'd rather have a kid learn how to handle pressure that way and go finish than, the mic and drill,
Yeah, totally.
you know. So, but did you? I mean, going back to you, like when did it start to click for your process? You know, did you start to think, oh, I want to play in college, or was something about the process just that started to click for you once you realized, oh, this is really transferring to my game, like what I do on my practice time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, and especially as I see later in life, I think just anything that you can work at and get better at is fulfilling. So whether that's basketball or other sports or really anything for kids. Um, so maybe that's for parents too, of not necessarily pushing your kid into a single activity, but it's like if you see something that they can work at and make progress at, and they tend to have a natural like desire to keep going. I think for me it came internally, right? Like I didn't have a lot of outside forces pushing me to get in the gym or whatever. I just genuinely liked doing it. Especially some of that just like alone time, even where I could go like, just go to the gym and work on my stuff. And if any, even today, it still helps me kind of clear my head a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But, I really, again, to your credit, I think I took a lot, from you and a few other guys in terms of like when you're going in there, have a plan. You were big with like writing down, encouraging me to like kind of write down the different workouts and check things off. And I think once I saw the progress and started to get better, it just was kind of a snowball effect
Mm-hmm.
from there.
And then you fast forward, you're at Michigan State. I remember you calling me, and I was like, I know one guy. Stan Heath was my coach who came from Michigan State, and we, I think, we made a few calls and said, hey, we got Brandon wants to try out, right? Kind of walk on.
Yeah, I mean,
Tell,
and that
tell me
was
about that process because I don't even remember it. I'm so old. I'm like, I don't even know
that
what happened.
was an interesting process, right? Like I had an academic scholarship to Michigan State. I had loved the Michigan State basketball since I was a kid. And for my college experience, I think I was okay going to Michigan State and not ending up on the team. I just wanted that kind of bigger college experience. And I just kept playing. I played intramural for those 2 years. I went to the open tryout both my freshman and sophomore year, which is, just kind of a hilarious experience. 200 kids, just like everybody just jacking up shots, trying to
Uh
get
huh.
trying to get noticed.
Uh huh.
But I knew that I wanted to get into coaching as well. So that my sophomore year, I had made friends with a couple of the assistants, and they, set it up to where I could come and watch practice a number of days a week. And so I was just around the program, watching practice. I would pick the brains of the different assistants that I had become closer with.
Mm-hmm.
And then that summer I stayed and took a summer semester. I think that was the final 4 year, and they had, I think, 5 guys go to the league after that. So numbers were kind of down, and they just needed bodies for summer, for summer pickup and summer
Uh huh.
runs. And so I started playing and had like a couple good weeks, really just had a couple good weeks. Again, I think I kind of come into my own athletically a little bit over those 2 years. And I just always just really been in the gym working on stuff. And the fact that I had just been around the program and kind of seen
Yeah.
I think my mind was more developed in a basketball sense too. And then so at that point it was, just sort of worked out where I didn't even have to go to the open tryout.
That's great.
It was a scenario where I think they knew what I was signing up for, right? Because
Yeah.
that's a problem that you get with a lot of walk-ons, is that they make the team and then 3 weeks later they're not around.
They're like,
They're not around
do
because
I
they don't.
really want Tom Izzo
Yeah,
cussing at me on
they
not boxing
don't.
out on the
They
wardrobe?
don't, they don't realize the commitment to it
Yeah, it's a huge commitment.
as well. Uh,
What did you learn from that experience? Looking back on it.
I mean, looking back, I think it definitely has a lot of there's a lot that's benefited me later in life. From, even though I didn't see a lot of court time, just being involved specifically with Coach Izzo. Like a lot of people always ask me, what did you take away from that? And I think that the biggest thing that I took from him is just like the level of care or the level of commitment that it takes to be, really good at anything. Um, it really, especially if you're the leader, like he's a classic example of like he works the hardest, right? He's the first one in the office, he's the last one to leave.
Mm-hmm.
It's a scenario where it matters more to him than it matters to anybody else. And I really think you need that, to kind of be a good leader or be a good coach. And when I became a coach, I was like, man, this is starting to matter more to me than it does to the kids. And at first I thought that was a problem. But as I look back, it was like, well, he was in the same boat. He
Yeah.
was in the same boat. And I think in
Yeah.
order to be a good coach, you have to like, you really have to care a lot about it. And that the same thing goes for the players too, right? Like if you really want to be the best, if you want to be good at anything, like there's sacrifices that you're going to need to make. There's just no way around it.
Yeah. That's a good one. I mean, caring, yeah, when you care as much as Tom Izzo cares about winning, it's like you can see how much he cares too, even while he's coaching. But what you don't get to see is all that behind the scenes stuff,
Yeah,
of
I
him.
think like just that attitude of like never settling, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the pretty good is never good enough type of a scenario. And I think I don't know. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on this too. I think that actually sets you up for a lot of pain as well, because anytime you like care a lot about something and are not satisfied with like just being all right, or hey, we made the final four, like great job everybody type of a thing. Whereas like the locker room after those losses is still like, even after wins, right, is not a very quote unquote happy place a
Yeah.
lot of the time. And I think especially later in life after that, I still kind of struggle with that balance, right, of like the high standards, never settling, holding yourself accountable versus the okay, set back and like you can't win everything, like just enjoy it a little bit. And I think that that's still a balance that I struggle with.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting kind of philosophical uh crossroads in terms of like being attached to the result that you really, 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 really want, right? As a
Yeah.
basketball player, we have a finite thing happening. We have a finite game where there's a score, there's refs, there's rules. You try to win this finite game, but and there's suffering in that. Winning without losing, there can't be winning, without happiness. Like you can never feel happiness if you've probably never felt the other side of it,
Right.
you know. And so like there's this philosophical side of like, okay, you can't always you will be on the ups and downs of that kind of finite game. But then I look at sports also on the other side of like, well, I'm choosing to play in this sandbox. I'm choosing to be in this game. And so to me it was about like what do I truly love about it? Because yeah, the wins and losses are kind of the measuring stick or the outcome, but I would probably still play basketball every day, regardless if I had the chance to be, at the top of the mountain. Like if I didn't play college basketball, I probably still would have really loved playing open gym or pickup, and so really it became about kind of the craft of mastering the craft of basketball was fun to me. That process of like you said, doing the work, working on your stuff, getting in the gym, it kind of frees your mind. You can get in the flow state. It's like art. It's like writing. It's like
Yeah.
music. Like we don't write music to be the fastest music writer of all time. Like we
Yeah.
write music because it's enjoyable. Just because I get to the end of the song faster, like, oh, I'm the best music writer ever. Like there's that part of basketball where it's like, well, it's the art. It is this art, and you get to be in the flow of
Yeah,
express.
let's talk about that a little bit, because
Yeah.
that I think is what kept me coming back to. And I know I wanted to hit this part for like the parents or the kids out there, especially when you talk about AAU and going to play better talent. It's like you might get your ass kicked, but try and take something, like be observant and try and take something away from it, right? It's like, okay, this guy was beating me to the basket every single time. Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
What was happening in that sense? And I think that like for me, my crossover developed into what it turned out to be because of this one instance where I was just getting smoked by this by
Yeah.
this kid, and I was like, he's not that fast, like he's not
Yeah.
that quick, but he's just like dusting me every time. And I think where I could have been like dwelled on it or been upset by myself of like, just angry at getting beat, just that kind of switching mindset of like, okay, what is he doing that's leading to that? And then I started to adopt that myself. So much like art where a lot of art is imitation, right? So you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
take something, like so much of my game was built off, things that you did, or things that Johnny did, or, again, just like even just random kids that beat me doing different things. So I think then putting all that together to, sort of have it be your own creative expression of the
Right.
game or whatever it is you're doing is really one of the more fulfilling parts, when you can start to really piece things together and to make it your own.
Well, that's like, and I think that's where basketball is infinite in terms of what you can learn. Learning is like if you're my girlfriend's a PhD in neuroscience. I said, well, like, what do you love about it? She's like, I can keep learning. There's a never ending learning happening every day. I'm learning, I'm learning, I'm learning. But I think with sports like that or anything where we're attached to this, oh, I got to get to the top of this mountain or I got to win this game, you forget that everything is just learning. Like you said, that guy that
Yeah.
dusted you with his crossover, how did he do that? Like, how can I take some of what he did, or was he herky jerky with his setup? And so any setback or obstacle, really it's just an illusion. It's just learning.
Yeah.
We're viewing it as suffering, and it feels like suffering when a coach is yelling at you or you're losing or you can't do what you thought, you're capable of doing. But, at the end of the day, all you could do is come back and work on your stuff and get better and keep learning. And that's the infinite side of it. Like I was never going to be as athletic as LeBron James, but I think, playing against him, I realized like, oh, this guy is, he's a super freak. He's like on turbo button. I'm never going to be able to do the athletic things he can do. But instead of like, I wasn't mature enough to really look at that and say like, what does LeBron do every day? Like, what else is he doing that I'm not doing? Like what are some things I can learn from him in terms of his process? And I think the process is where kids kind of get lost, because they're so worried about getting to the
Yeah,
top of that mountain. It's like, no,
I
man,
agree.
just
Yeah.
enjoy the process and learn as much as you can, even from all the all the BS and the setbacks. And if a coach doesn't like you, or kind of use that as motivation fuel, jet fuel for your process. And I think that was one thing I did really well because I was never the best. I wasn't even the best player in Petoskey. John Flynn was better than me. I got to Kent State. I never felt like I was the best there. So I always kind of had this underdog mentality in terms of my craft. I had to have a better process than everybody else if I was going to like be able to express, and have success on a court, in those short moments. Like everything else I did was just for those moments of like pure joy and ecstasy on a court, hopefully. But, you know, that doesn't always happen the way you think it's going to happen either. Like I would have loved to have been in the Final Four. That was heartbreaking when I was in the Elite Eight and we got beat. And you start to measure yourself on those moments of failure that you think are ultimate failure, but they're really just like everything's just a learning. um it's like a pivot point of, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? Am I going to stick with am I going to make my process better, or am I going to feel depressed and get set back and just kind of lament and wallow around in my outcome attachment brain? And I think that's hard for kids.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And to your point about maturity, I think I was very much like that. Growing up, where you're so attached, your brain is attached to your brain is attached to the outcome. Whereas the sooner you can learn, I think, to be a bit kinder to yourself, and to switch the perspective into always that growth and learning mindset of like, all right, we got beat by 50, we got
Yeah.
beat by 50, like rather than this isn't I'm terrible,
Yeah.
self talk. It's like, okay, what can I take from today? What can I apply to it? Yeah, and just being a little bit, I guess, just more open to the fact that certain wins and losses are, the ball bounces one way, or you get one call from the refs, or a
Right.
shot goes in that maybe wouldn't have otherwise. It's all just in the end of a percentage game, and you're not going to win every one. So it's how you handle yourself in those, not even really setbacks, but just like treating everything as an opportunity for growth. I think if I had learned that earlier on, I would have come out, even further ahead,
Yeah. But
even if it's only in your own mind, right? Like a self-satisfaction scenario.
I think that's the beauty. I think, like you're saying, you took a lot from Tom Izzo or sports in general, because it also, let's talk about virtue, living in virtue, living in the chase of excellence. It's not about the outcome. It's just about living in excellence. And if it's making your bed, try to make your bed the best you can today. You know, it might not be every day, but if you do it in excellence. Have that virtuous like mode of living. And I think that's what I learned from college basketball and pro basketball was like by not living in virtue, you're really only limiting yourself, you know, by not being trying to be excellent in the next thing, whether it's writing or for you entrepreneurial startups, you know, you're applying the life of, you know, the lessons from sports to your now everyday life. You know, I imagine like this happens all the time with athletes is they forget that because they're only thinking about, oh, you know, my career is over. Like what, you know, and then they don't have an identity. But really the identity that made you a college athlete wasn't, yeah, that's just a ball you're putting through a metal hoop, but like the virtue that you had showing up for morning weights, showing up for conditioning. Most normal people will, you know, like the average person doesn't want to suffer for that, you know. And the more you choose that path, I think the less suffering really affects you. You know, that pain or physical suffering, mental suffering of like, oh, am I good enough? You're like, well, it doesn't matter because I'm here and I got to
Yeah.
continue to improve. Like I can like think about thinking how good I am all day or how bad I am, but that's not helping me. You know, it's kind of like I just, you know, I think that's why Nike really killed their slogan, just do it. Like you actually just have
Yeah.
to go do the work every
Yeah.
day, whether it's entrepreneur, whether you're a startup, whether you're trying to move up the corporate ladder, like only by doing excellent work do you create value, you
And
know?
maybe that's the take. Maybe if there's one takeaway that we leave people with for this one, it is that just do the work. Regardless of what it comes to. And I heard The Rock actually talking about that on Rogan the
Uh-huh.
other day, where he was like, it's really is about the process, right? So everything from that you learn from sports that you're then taking out to your life, or whether it's again basketball or football or
Yeah.
baseball or soccer, or whatever sport you're playing, of just like, have you seen the documentary Stutes, the Jonah Hill one about his therapist?
Uh-uh. I haven't
Is
seen it.
the the therapist has three things. He's like, there's only three certainties in life. It's pain, uncertainty, and constant work. And if you can learn to embrace that process, you're setting yourself up for a happy life and for success. And I think that kind of rang true to me in the sense of, okay, there's always pain, whether that's in the form of a loss or you didn't play as well as you thought you were going to, whether it's like that mental anguish or the physical pain of working through
Mm-hmm.
things, accomplishing them. Um, and then that uncertainty factor of, especially in a team sport, right? Like you never know. There's so many external factors that go into it, whether everyone's feeling great, somebody's sick, a teammate
Mm-hmm.
doesn't play well, you don't play well, somebody from the other team just has an insane night. Um, and then the constant work aspect of it, of, all you can really do is show up and do your best every day. And I think that's maybe the hardest one a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
I
It's
think that is
staying
the
true
hardest
to,
one.
like, you say, for how much joy there is and how much you love the game, like there was certainly days where like you don't
Oh,
want to get up and go to the weight room, or you don't want to hit that second shooting workout or whatever. But I
yeah.
think that,
Especially in the northern Michigan summers. That one's super hard.
yeah,
I remember I was in eighth grade and I was like, my goal was to play basketball, train every day for the whole every day of the summer. You know, and like,
yeah,
you know, there'd be a day, you know, I would try to get, as they say, eat your frog first thing, you know, like I would try to eat the frog in the morning and go do my dribbling and do all the shooting stuff. And I'd be at Torch Lake. Torch Lake's a nice area, guys. You know, like there's a lot of fun stuff to do on the
yeah,
lake. I got my cousins there. I got my friends with boats. You know, you've been out there. There's a ton of distractions, but like I think having that process goal of like all I have to do is just show up and do my best today. It's like I don't have to be perfect. I just
yeah,
got to get a
yeah,
ball and
yeah,
sweat, and
yeah,
then I'm good. I've reached that process goal, and I think like in northern Michigan especially, that is really hard to do. And I think this generation of kids, you know, now you have the dopamine slot machine effect of like I got this video game, I got this app, I got this social media, I got to compare like what's everybody else doing. It's even more, it's more of a distracted environment, you know, than when we had like really all I could do was go play tag or flat, you know, football with my friends or, you know, like there wasn't a ton of video game. There wasn't I wasn't playing Fortnite exchanging skins, you know, like, oh, I got a new
yeah,
skin, bro. Like, you
yeah,
know, that didn't,
yeah,
I don't know what I would have done. Maybe I wouldn't have been very good because my dopamine, you know, would have been like ching, ching, short term gratification, ching. So like it's and it goes to parents too, like how you know delaying gratification. You know, I struggle with this too. You know, like why do I work out? I'm 44. Like, what's the point of me being healthy now? Like, I like literally think about it, and I'm like, well, what's the alternative? Like,
Right.
let's invert. Like, if I'm not willing to work for, you know, fitness and being able to ride a bike or and play some pickleball, like the alternative is that I can't do any of that because
Right.
I'm just like so
Yeah.
so out of shape and so tired. I can't walk upstairs. I'm sedentary. So like, I literally play that like stoic, invert your life game. What would you do without what you could do? Like if what would you
Yeah.
do
I like
without
that.
your health?
Yeah.
What would you do without your job if you had to start over at zero? What would you do if you went bankrupt? Like I always play that game, and that's you know sometimes how I decide what I'm going to do. What my process is, what my work is going to be relative to like the very thing that I probably feel like I don't need to do or don't want to do. You know, and then as soon as I
And I
start
think,
doing it,
yeah,
I'm hey,
I
I'm
think
like, oh, this is fun.
that's a huge lesson for kids too, right? Like especially like even coming from my scenario of there's a whole host of things had to go right in order for the sheer accidental numbers to work out for me to make the Michigan State team that year, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you guys don't go to the NBA, I'm not on the team. Now, does that take away from all the other things that I did leading up to that point just because the outcome was slightly different? I don't think so. I think it's like as long as like you said, you learn the process and you learn how to do the work, that it benefits you in so many ways later in life, whether you end up winning the state championship or playing for a college team or whatever. Like there's certain you're playing the cards you're dealt, and some people aren't going to have the athleticism or aren't going to have the those sort of accidental serendipitous opportunities that put them in the right place. But I don't think that takes away from the just the intrinsic value of of the process in
Right.
itself. Like ultimately, that's going to benefit you one way or another, even if it's not a college scholarship or all state honors or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, it's like the talented athlete in high school or college that can't move on with their lives after
Yeah,
their careers end. They don't know how, they never really had a process. They just relied on their
right.
talent,
Yeah,
and they built their identity around that talent. And to me, it's like, well, what if you're building your identity around, your process and your work ethic and the values? John, my cousin John, we talked about the values of an athlete are way more important than the talent or the goals you set. The values of integrity. Do you show up to the workouts you say you're going to do on that week? Are you a high effort guy? Or are you, the values that are you showing up with joy? Do you live with joy in everything you do? Like knowing your core values as an athlete creates ripples in after sports. But if you're just that talented athlete that's like, I was like the all-state quarterback, but I never left my town, and now I'm doing, I'm just I'm just drinking at the local bar, talking about all the good old days where I threw for 300, and I had five touchdowns. You remember that game against
yeah.
Sheboygan?
No, that's great. Do you listen to Andrew Huberman at all? I was listening
Yeah,
to
yeah,
Huberman the other day where it was about um like attaching your identity to certain things, and even for praising, and I guess that would have a like parents to kids or even like to your friends or
yeah.
spouse or whoever it is of not necessarily attaching your identity to like I'm a great basketball player, or I'm even something as simple as like telling your kid you're very smart or you're very good at
Mm-hmm.
you're a great pitcher or anything like that, but in terms of phrasing it all around effort and like that showing up and doing the work of like I'm someone who fights through and does the work, like win or lose, rain or shine. I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone who does the work. I'm someone who follows through on what I say I'm going to do. If you can attach your identity to that, it seems to be, that you again are just setting yourself up better than
Yeah,
like being that guy at the bar who was always,
a prima donna.
yeah, who his identity was attached to.
His parents were over there telling him how
Yeah,
great game,
yeah,
great game,
You're a
Billy.
great quarterback. You're a great
Yeah,
quarterback, and then when all of a sudden when you're not a quarterback anymore, if your identity is attached to that, and I think a lot of probably pro athletes deal with that a bit too, right? Like when retirement comes around, it's like if your full identity is attached to just being good at the sport rather than being attached to the process.
yeah.
I think
No, I think
you
I
attach
fall
to the
into that
process,
bucket. I
yeah,
fall into that. I mean, when I stopped playing basketball, that was, I mean, since I was 14, I was basically doing, 2 days training all the time, 14 to 35, you know, basically, I don't think there's any way. I think letting go of something you love or identity that you don't even realize you have is hard no matter what. Like even if you got out of college athletics and you didn't play pro sports, I think a lot of college athletes even struggle to make that transition to like, okay, who am I now?
Yeah.
Like, well, who are you now is like that. Yeah, that's a really good question. Who are you now?
Yeah.
You're like, well, you're
Yeah.
probably some of those core values that helped you become what you were. And now you have to learn how to apply those in different ways and be curious and explore different paths. I think a lot of a lot of people, I mean, I think humans in general, we are conditioned by our society, our culture to believe that we should have everything figured out and we should know exactly which direction to go. But that's just not the case because people change their careers 7 times over a lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, like if everybody knew what they were doing, then everybody would just stick with what they're doing. But I think that's also like the beautiful part about life is that you can, if you have some of these core values from sports, it doesn't really matter. You can
Yeah.
literally do anything you want in life if you take kind of like that. I'm a high effort guy. I'm going to show up and work my butt off regardless of how I feel. I'm
Yeah.
going to take care of my teammates. I'm going to be a good teammate. Like all those things are pretty useful in everyday life. Now, did I know that
For
when I
sure.
stopped playing? No, I did not.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm the man. I'm the former MVP of a Belgian league. Like, who's going to help me? No, but I think I learned as I got older to suspend that kind of ego and that identity and say like, wow, my career is dwindling and I see the, kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. And, really what I missed the most about it was just being around my teammates and helping my teammates and working on my craft. Like it was frustrating to like watch my athleticism diminish, but it was just as much fun to see these young players that I worked with in the pros. 2 kids in my on my French team got drafted, and we used to work out after practice. We do dribbling, we do shooting drills, we do, so it was like I got to vicariously kind of live just like when I was a senior in high school. I had no idea that like infinite game of helping others is always it's always available, but how am I going to show up in that role? How am I going to start Huffman basketball if I really want to help Northern Michigan kids? Like, am I going to, just kind of be, am I going to stop living in integrity? Am I going to stop being joyful? Am I going to stop having compassion? Like all those core values. Am I going to stop being a good teammate? No, that's not going to help me run a, basketball training business either. So I think that's like, and I'm sure as you've gotten older, as you look back now, from Michigan State and Tom Izzo cussing at you to box out, like what are some of the things you are finding sports has just changed how you work in the real world?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, and even as I'm thinking about what you said of transitioning careers multiple times and like moving from, from sports into more of like the quote unquote real world of being a functioning adult. Um, I think that realizing that it really is about the process and less about the ultimate talent is important, right? Because there's just so many things that are outside of your control. Again, like we talked about inside of the basketball world, but take like if you're in a sales role, right? When you have a job, there's so many of those external factors of, who you're selling to. Is the company ready to buy something? Is the product that you're selling the greatest? And so many successes and failures are due, really in part to chance or those external factors. So I think it's as much as you can just attach yourself to that identity of doing the work and working through the process that you're I mean, somebody at one of the camps that I went to, I can't even remember the coach's name now, but he said the takeaway that I had was he said you would rather be prepared for an opportunity that never presents itself than to not be prepared for one that does. So I think I've certainly taken that
Mm,
forward in
that's
life
good.
of always trying to prepare for success, right? Like set yourself up for everything to go right. And even if it doesn't, it's like, okay, that's part of life. But you never want to be in that scenario of where you feel that you didn't put in the work and all of a sudden that, that once in a lifetime opportunity was presented to you and you weren't ready to take advantage of it. I think that's kind of my worst, would be one of my worst fears or my worst, like
Yeah.
that would be a hard thing to accept, right?
Yeah. That's what wakes you up in the middle of the night in a
Yeah.
cold sweat.
Yeah.
Hey kids, sports is fun. I mean, but I think any human goes through. I mean, you're gonna always face anxiety in work, life, balance, kids. Like I don't have kids. I get anxious about the finding. Like there's a never ending stress. Like we always have
Yeah.
everybody. Like if you were to say there'll be no stress in your life, okay, I'm a billionaire. Okay, but yeah, do you see a lot of billionaires that are look super
Yeah.
happy and are like not under a lot of
I think
duress or like
I think
they're
in
just as
whatever
dysfunctional?
scenario,
Yeah.
you gotta find the fun in the day to day, and it can't just be. I think that's maybe a takeaway too that I learned. Right, it's not like, okay, we're gonna win the national championship and then everybody will be happy, or we're gonna win the Big Ten title and then I'll be
Mm-hmm.
happy, or I'm gonna make
Mm-hmm.
first team All State and then I'll be, then I can relax, or then I'll be excited. I think you really, especially in order for it to be sustainable, like you have to find the fun moments. And for as stressful and whatever is all that the time was, like looking back, there's so many of those little moments that, where I did find it so fun or so enjoyable. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important to take on later in life too.
Mm-hmm. I think I had a quote I shared in my HB mentoring group. I'm gonna look it up, but it's basically the idea that consistency consistency amplifies ability, right? And I think about that in everything now. Like, am I being, my fitness routine is definitely like lacking some consistency, right? Because I'm arguing with myself. My back hurts. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I just got to get my back better, and then I'll start being consistent again. I can't run right now, so why would I go bike on a Peloton or try something new that I'm not, or swim? Like I hate swimming, but like that's just kind of the ego battle that
Yeah.
happens in anything you do that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And if I really want to amplify my abilities, whatever arena I'm in, having that, like doubling down on consistency is where we can typically find, especially if it's something that we find purpose or meaningful progress in. I like it might be really hard to double down on something I don't enjoy doing, like cleaning the house. But like if I double down on what I love to do in terms of like helping kids or doing more camps, that essentially will being more consistent in my craft, will potentially make me more money. What can I do with money? Well, I can hire a maid that will take, essentially take that part of suffering away from me. But then I'm like, well, why do I struggle with this suffering? Like I should just embrace that anyway and do it because that's helping me build virtue. It's like this. It's just like a never-ending suffer fest, is what I found. It's like let's just embrace the suck here, and like that's the whole
But I think
point.
you have to be able to find the fun with it within
Yeah.
that, right? I think like that's so important. Like when you're beating yourself up in a workout,
Yes.
to still be able to like gamify it in some sense, so that it's not all,
Right.
um, that it's not all
Sucky.
just like suffer fest. Yeah,
But yeah, it's like you want to be able to have um you want to be able to do stuff that is hard but take joy in that
yeah, yeah,
and I think that's kind of the virtue piece that I'm talking about. Like live virtue is just doing that.
yeah.
It's
You have to
just
embrace that
it's just
aspect.
taking joy in the suffering that you are literally doing to, you're like you have to do this to amplify your abilities or to have a better life. Like if you never do those things, you're essentially just kind of passive,
Yeah,
and love, uh um, craft, mastery, skills, like that's a verb. Those are all verbs. You have to be doing something to acquire more skill. You have to be doing something to create more value in the world, whether you're a business or a basketball player. So like, yeah, anyway, that's a, I didn't know we were going to go this deep, Brandon. You're getting into my philosophical musings now. So where are
so
you right now? Like where you out west? You're,
yeah. I've been out west really since after college. I moved to Colorado after college.
mm-hmm.
Coached for a while out there, and now I've recently moved about 8 hours north up into Idaho, kind of by near Wyoming. And considering getting back into coaching here, of just going into the introducing myself to the school system here and seeing if I can get involved on a not a full-time basis by any means, but
Yeah.
more of the skill development stuff.
Yeah. That's always fun to jump back in, and the energy kids give you back is always, it's worth it, I think. as long as the parents aren't absolutely crazy. But as long as the kids aren't like, oh, Billy's the best player you'll ever meet, you're like,
But
yeah, but is he the hardest? Is he putting high effort into everything? Because
yeah,
that's all I really care
again,
about.
the high effort.
Yeah, is
That's
he a
why you
high
care.
effort
That's why
player?
you care. Are you a high
I'd
effort
rather
guy?
coach a high effort
High
player.
effort guy. High
But
effort guy.
usually like kids that are really good at basketball, their parents are usually running a little hot. Their egos are
Yeah.
usually they usually are like. I mean, my dad ran hot, man. He was writing letters to the coaches. He was trying to get me more playing time. He was like, "This is the,
I mean, maybe
you know,
this is the nod for high effort. I remember that. So at Michigan State, most of my job was just scout team stuff. So
uh,
I would try and emulate other guys from other teams as we were coming into it. And one week, I forget who we were playing, but my role was like the assistants were like, all right, you watch him film, he just goes nuts with the ball. He like just dinks around with the ball a bunch, and then he drives and he kind of throws up terrible shots. And so again, for like an hour straight in practice, I'm just like using every ball handling move I got, driving into
uh,
lane, and just throwing up just wild hook shots over the back. And like
uh,
the first time I go in there, I just 100 miles an hour, throw up a hook, just off the glass, no rim at all. And one of the assistants is there being like, "Good, that's what he does. That's what he does. He's
you're
just
like looking around.
downhill all the time, full motor." So I think like,
High effort, baby.
yeah, there's effort can make up for a lot.
So how do you use effort now, like in your entrepreneurial? Because I want people to like book your you have like you have an operation out in Wyoming. I know I can like do a helicopter ride with
We
you.
can
You can
we
can
can
you
put it in the
drop me
show
out of
notes.
a helicopter?
We can put it in
Aren't
the
you an
show
extreme
notes.
skier now?
We can put it in the show
All
notes.
right, we'll find
Uh,
everybody
no, I
can
mean, I
make it
think
their own.
a good example was I was raising some money for a real estate project that I'm working on, and it was really just that putting in the effort, right? So like I had to have all my ducks in a row. So in the back to that opportunity, being prepared for an opportunity, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to find the right investors, but I wanted to know if I have that opportunity that I'm prepared for it.
Hmm.
So just showing up, doing the work, and then the cards fell in the right place, and I ended up raising the cash and pulling off the project. So I think um, that prep work or that process that I took from basketball has certainly showed up in success in other ways. But there's certainly been many projects where I've done that, and they, for one reason or another, they haven't come through. So I think
Hmm.
it's
Just
dealing with
learning,
success and
constant
failure.
learning in the
Yeah.
startup world. I mean, that's all startups are to me. It's just a big dish of learning.
I mean, I think the same can probably be applied to a lot of your writing as well, right? It's like
Yeah.
you gotta show up, you gotta do the work, you gotta write, and there's going to be some external factors at play, whether certain things resonate or get picked up by different outlets that choose to share it. Whereas the success or failure of a certain article, um, isn't your identity. It's really just showing up and doing the work,
Yeah.
putting in that work each morning.
Yeah, it's like if people want to come read what's in my head, they can come read it, but like I don't care if you like it or not. I mean, I like it when people like or if they find something useful from my writing, that's great. But I'm going to keep writing regardless of how you feel about my, writing
I'm
game,
I'm
like
curious. Do you have a process in the sense that like do you write when something comes to you, or do you have like a time set aside that you sit down every day, and you're going to put in some sort of
so I
effort?
I first started writing kind of like how I decided like my brother and I talked about this like basketball when our first like 5 years of development it was pretty there was a lack of structure. There was a lack of process. It was just game. It was just fun. Just go play, show up to Saturday recreational league and play as hard as you can and have fun. So I'm kind of looking at writing as this same flow of like, I want to
Yeah.
develop writing like I did basketball. I just want it to be fun and I want to build the love of writing. So right now my process is like I just write every day. It's kind of like morning pages or journaling. Sometimes I have an idea pop into my head. Some days I write, 10 titles. I'll write, 10 I'll work on 10
Yeah.
different titles, and there's different things I've been, taking now, I'm on year like 3 or 4. So now I'm like, okay, I kind of want to get a coach now. So I've hired I joined a writing program and that's helped me a ton. I mean, there's just the knowledge out there from other writers that have published or have done books, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like a little kid in this. Like I'm like the
Yeah.
fifth grade kid who's shooting from his hip, like, and now, so now I'm like, okay, I just want to continue learning and continuing to like develop my writing process. Now it's getting more into research. Like I've been meeting with people about how they research things. Malcolm Gladwell, for instance, I love his writing style. He creates these puzzles for his reader, and
Yeah.
it's just super fun to read. And I'm like, man, I wonder if I'll ever be that good. And I'm like, well, why do I even, you start to
Yeah.
measure yourself and compare
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
It's just like, just keep learning and keep practicing the writing, and I think, I'm buying more writing books, Stephen King's writing book. You have Bird by Bird. You have all these amazing writers out there. I joined another I'm in two writing groups now. So it's like, I'm trying to do the same thing I did with basketball, and I think with basketball, I would join, people that were better than me in hopes that I could learn from them or they would mentor me. And so now, like you being around Michigan State, you're just
Yeah.
like, you're putting yourself, even though you're not a Michigan State basketball player, you're putting yourself in you're acting as if you are, So just I'm acting as if I'm Stephen King. I'll write for 2 to 3 hours every day. Some of that I'll never publish. Some of it's just garbage, and I read it and I'm like, that was an interesting day. But but I love the flow of
Yeah.
writing, and I I feel like I capture emotions and dialogue, and like I'm a decent storyteller, but I have a long way to go. I published a book it's on Amazon. I co-collaborated on The Golden Dream, which was like my first real book collaboration, and I'm like, dang, dude, I published a book, and like within 3 years, I have a book on Amazon, that I collaborated on,
Yeah.
and yet I still feel like I have so much to learn, like it's just like a never ending. That's an infinite game for me, which is cool because I feel like I'm not really attached to the outcome of being like a best-selling author, or it'd be nice if I could just pay my rent, with some writing, with some writing money. I have I have a dark dark chocolate peanut butter smoothie espresso concoction that I get at my local coffee shop here, and I'm like,
That
if I
sounds
could, I
delicious.
want to order one of these every day, but I can't
Yeah.
afford to right now.
If
My writing needs to take off.
my writing
Yeah.
could pay for my $15 smoothie at the coffee
Yeah.
shop.
So
Have you read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act?
no, but I will.
That's an interesting one from a writing standpoint. And now that I'm thinking about it, probably could apply to basketball a little bit. He's big
Yeah.
on uh putting in constraints on certain things that usually wouldn't exist. So
Yeah.
even like, okay, you're gonna play 2-on-2, but you're not allowed to run any pick and
Can't
roll.
dribble, or you
Yeah,
can't.
yeah,
Yeah.
or no dribbles, or
Yeah.
even like, okay, you have to everything you have to finish 1-on-1, but every finish has to be with your left hand, no matter where it is. So like that sort of stuff. Or with writing, it could be like, all right, I'm gonna try and write today, and I'm not gonna use the letter E at all,
Ah,
or like just like weird little games like that.
yeah.
They kind of force creativity. Um, yeah, that's an interesting one if you haven't read it.
Oh yeah. And I no, that's funny because I do that with basketball, training. I'll be like, the ball's flat. You cannot dribble today, And the kids are like, their eyes get real big and they're like, you can't dribble. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, like there's 9 players that aren't dribbling, and what you do when you're not dribbling is really important,
Yeah.
But that's, yeah, I'm gonna check that out. I'll get the notes from you. But well, Brandon, I don't want to go too long. I think we're at about an hour and 15. So thanks for hopping on the show. If there's anywhere people can, plug anything you're doing, is there anything you want to say? Is there anything, just give your shout outs to any where people can find you.
Nah, I'm actually I've made a conscious step back from all forms of social media at
There
this
you go.
at this phase.
Yeah.
So I would say
I
my
wish
sign
all
off
kids
is
would
just
do that.
that my sign off is just do the work. And I think
Dude,
for me, eliminating the social media aspect of things, where I'm just trying to not um have those like non-productive
distractions.
sort of distractions. And I am trying
Yeah.
to read more and just actually be in touch with, rather than communicate through social media, to reach out and make phone calls and
Yeah.
connect with people has been helpful for me in my own process. So that's what I'll leave it with, a do the work. And if anybody
Dude,
wants
do the
if
work
anybody
and
wants to get in touch with me,
delete your social
they
app.
can
Yeah.
figure out how. Yeah.
We can track down Brandon. He's somewhere in the mountains of Wyoming, but we'll track him down. I actually did something like that. I put all my social media icons on the, like, you know how like with my iPhone you can scroll.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
first page is like my email and the set stuff like that and calendar, and the second page is like I don't even know what's on my second page. It's like apps that I've never used. And my very last page is like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, like, and it's like really improved, like just by adding that small amount of friction between
Yeah.
me. Like I can't just push my finger and get into it. Like my screen time has diminished by 80%, I bet. I mean, like it'd be actually interesting to see, but I barely even look at that stuff anymore because it's not in front of me.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to do it, and my writing has improved. So, or at least it's
Yeah. It's less of a distraction for
yeah.
when you write. Do you put your phone on airplane or like set it aside just so you
I
have
just
that uninterrupted
I
focus?
leave it downstairs usually,
Yeah.
and then I forget that I have like a meeting with you or something. And I'm like, yeah. But thanks for coming on the
All
Huffman
right, brother.
Basketball Podcast, man. We really appreciate you hopping on. I look forward to hopefully seeing you soon in a in the live flesh. We can
Yeah,
play some one on one.
for sure. Long overdue.
All right, man. We'll
All right. Have a
we'll
great weekend.
see you. You too.